Hello everyone, I am Betz Golden and I am super excited to be here today on Scrapbook.com's YouTube walking you through my 5 favorite card hacks at the current moment. Believe it or not, I actually created this card with just one piece of cardstock and one type of ink. That's right, I didn't use any special pattern paper or anything like that. This is so easy. You guys are going to love it. So let's jump on in and create this card. The first one is all you need is a 1 sheet of heavy pound cardstock. I am using the Simon Hurley Stark White cardstock. This is 110 pound and it is 8.5 by 11. So when you get your cardstock, all you're going to do is you're going to slice it down in the middle and then you are going to score on one side. And that's going to actually be your card base. Then you're going to take the other 2 pieces, cut them in half, and on one piece, you are going to cut it down to a 4 by 5.25 because your card front is going to be a 4.25 by 5.5. So we want it just to slip in there quite nicely. And then your other piece is going to be what you're going to use to stamp and do your sentiments and things like that on. So once you get those cut, make sure you end up scoring down the center. Always put your watermark on or signature so people know where your card came from. That's super nice for them. And then you can go ahead and move on to the next card hack, which is to use dye ink instead of colored cardstock to create your background. We're going to create our base color as well as a beautiful blended background. And like I had said, you're going to want to use dye ink for this. And I'm going to be using the Simon Hurley Sike and then also the Clear Skies as well as Overzealous. Pretty much any dye ink will work for this, but these are my favorite. I like the color combo on this. Now, if you noticed, I did go ahead and rotate my card, and that's just because I am left-handed. And so I need to just make sure that it doesn't feel odd to me. And so I like to rotate the card, and then I am just taking some washi tape from my stash, excuse me, I said that kind of funny. And I am taping it on my clothes a few times just to get some of that stickies off. I'm going to actually line this up with the crease and go ahead and blend from there because I am going to end up with ink on the outside of my crease line, and that may bother some people, but it doesn't really bother me. But for this, I thought I would just share this tip with you if that's something that you don't want to have to deal with, is your blendable color bleeding over. I'm going to go ahead and just use some Clear Skies to do this. And my third tip is to use the dome blenders. These blenders are fantastic. They're my very favorite. They are in a dome, really nice, heavy foam. I never get any kind of line on it. And that's what's really great about these is you can interchange them onto any kind of handle that you have. So this is a handle that I have from Ranger, but if you don't have a handle, I know that Scrapbook.com also has the handles that you can do as well. I'm just going to blend out on the edge because I'm just creating a color for the background, a nice color in the back. And I don't need it to be super perfect. It doesn't have to be covering the middle, so I don't have to waste my time doing all of the inside. Once you get your background to your liking, all you got to do is just peel this washi tape up and you have a nice clean line. The reason why you wanted to go ahead and try to kind of defuzz the washi tape is so that it doesn't tear your card base. This is why it is important to use a dye ink. It's for this step, not necessarily for that last step. You could have probably used any kind of ink you wanted, with the exception of probably pigment, because that just sits on top of the paper, doesn't absorb, so it can smear unless you decide to heat set it, of course. This one, what we're going to do is we're going to create our background, and we're going to be using the dye ink by Simon Hurley. The reason why I've opted for these inks is because I can blend them with a little bit of water at the end, which I like to do whenever I do a blended background. I am making sure that I am taking my color family into consideration when I do this. So I am doing colors that I know blend beautifully together, and that is this beautiful beautiful Sike, which is a lovely, almost like a greenish undertone to a yellow. And then also the Overzealous, which is a beautiful, kind of like a springtimey type green, and then also the Clear Skies, which is blue. And as you know, yellow and blue make green. Going in now with my Overzealous, and again, I'm just loading up my Dome Blender, and I'm just gonna go right on in, making sure that I blend over some of these colors that I've already blended previously. And I just really like how these colors all play well together. And then I'm going to go back over with that Sike blend and go over the edges, just on those spots. Put a little bit up here as well. So my darker color is last, and blend this one through as well. And once I get done with this, I'm going to go over any area that I think I might want more color. I tend to be a super whimsical and bright artist, so my cards tend to be very, very, very vibrant and bright. Before I wet this down, because this is why I want to use the dye ink, is I want to blend it with some water, right? Before I do that, I just want to go around the edges with my darkest color, which is the Clear Skies, and just ink them a little bit. And this will also bleed through and blend, which is exactly what I want, but I wanted there to be a little bit of definition. Going to take my water at this point, and I am just using my Distress Mister, and I'm just going to mist it out a little bit. And as you can see, that starts to interact and move beautifully. From here, what I want to do is I want to take my heat tool or my heat gun, and I want to dry it. And as I dry it, I not only want to dry it from the front, I also want to make sure that I dry it on the back. And the reason is because whenever you saturate the top or add water to the top of a project, it always seeps through to the back. So you can do a really great job of getting the front dry and then forgetting about that back. And when you go on to stamp on it, you may end up with some muddied image or a stamp that kind of bleeds out, or you'll get some fuzzy lines, and it's because you didn't get your back dry. So always make sure that you flip over your cardstock or your base, your substrate, and dry the back as much as you dry the front, so that you can have a beautiful substrate that will give you a nice, clean, stamped image that ends up nice and crisp on the top. This leads us into our fourth step, which is to use a background stamp that can do double duty. The background stamp that I'm going to be using for this card is actually the peel apart rubber stamp background by Simon Hurley, and it is called Party Hats. What I like about this stamp is not only do you get some fun party hats that are going to be super cute on our background piece that we created, but there are also a couple that are cut out that fit right into this stamp like a puzzle. These pieces I can stamp on a separate piece of paper and do some more coloring with the dye ink, and which we'll do in a moment, to create some more focal points on our card base. Now I'm going to be just stamping this out with my Misty. So I'm going to be removing this foam insert because this is a rubber stamp. It is a deep edged rubber stamp. So that means that it really wouldn't fit very nicely in here, and I don't have to have that extra cushion. So I'm just going to take my stamp like so. And I'm first going to just lay this out, making sure that all of my little puzzle pieces are inside of the stamp. And then I'm going to just pick it up. And then I am actually going to take my piece of prepared cardstock that we just did, the back, the card base, or card front, I should say, and I'm going to use a little pillowcase. This is full of it's like a static pouch, but what this does is if there's any residual moisture on my card, this will actually pick that up so that when I go to stamp, I'm going to get a nice crisp image, which is super important to me because I am going to use a little bit of embossing on this just to make it really, really special. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure I cover that really well. That removes all the moisture from my substrate. And then I'm gonna just pop this in here, and I'm going to actually move it over a little bit. And on the back of it, I am going to put a little bit of that washi tape that I used to adhere the card front to the mat to give me that crisp line when I did my blending on my card front. I'm going to actually use this as well, and I'm just going to pop this on to create some kind of just so it adheres to the misting. I can't use my magnets at this time because my card front is already cut down and the magnets would interfere with the stamp. So I am just going to take this like so and just tape that down like that, and that will allow me to get a nice image stamped in case I have to stamp it more than once, which sometimes happens when you're using a large stamp. And then I'll get a nice lineup each time. I'm going to be using the Distress Oxide in Black Soot, and then I'm going to go ahead and heat set it once I get it all done with some of this Distress Embossing Glaze and Hickory Smoke. What I love about this embossing glaze is you can pretty much throw any color on top of the Black Soot, and it's going to really make that black pop and vibrant. It's going to be beautiful. It doesn't really matter what color you do. I just wanted to do this because I thought that it mixed quite nicely with the color. And the reason why I'm embossing is just because I want it to have a really vibrant, beautiful pop in your face type background. So I'm just going to ink this up and get this all stamped and embossed. I did end up stamping that twice, and since I had to stamp it twice and I had it adhered with the washi tape on the back, it stamped beautifully. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and emboss this. As you can tell, we have an absolutely gorgeous, vibrant, bright, crisp background now. So we can set this aside, and like I said, I really like a background stamp that can do double duty. So I went ahead and popped out these cute little hats from the background tear apart stamp sets that I'm using, or the peel apart rubber background stamp, pardon me. It's the party hats again. Just gonna pick these up. I did go ahead and use my static type pillow right here to powder up the background, because I am going to use my dye ink again to color these in with a little bit of water. But I'm a super sloppy colorist. I'm not very good, so I don't want it to bleed all over the place. Normally I would just use a waterproof type ink, but considering that it is going to be, I'm coloring it, I can still color outside the lines. So to help me stay within the lines and pull all of that beautiful color together, I'm going to go ahead and emboss this as well. So I'm going to use that same Distress Oxide that I did before in the black, and I'm just going to pop this on over like so. And I always like to go in for a 2 stamps, so that's why I'm going to use my Misty once again, and then I'm just going to emboss this up like I did on the background. Here's another reason I wanted to use that dye ink. I'm going to paint in these little hats with them. This is such a fun, easy technique, and all you need really is water and a paintbrush. I am just going to use one of these Aquaflow pens. This works beautifully with this, and I'm just going to take, and I'm going to just use 2 colors. I'm going to use my Sike, so I'm just smooshing a little bit of it out on my mat, my craft mat, and then I'm going to use some Clear Skies. The reason why I'm not using Overzealous is because even though I don't like to color outside the lines, there's a good chance that I may still do that, and I want to make sure that where I blend the colors, it'll be pretty, and I don't really need that green. So I'm just going to take and start, I'm going to lay down my yellow first, and depending on how much water you add will depend on the vibrancy of your color. So right here, as you can tell, I need to pick up a little bit more because it's super light on the bottom. So there we go. And then I'm just going to make sure I wipe off that color really well. And then I'm going to pick up some of my clear sky, and I'm just going to go in. And as you can tell, it already is starting to bleed a little bit because I have a lot of water down, but it's getting my point across. I am liking the results. And I did go ahead and stamp out 3 of these just in case I did not like one of them. So I like to stamp out a little bit extra each time, and then I can just go ahead and pop in that up there on the top. What does help between layers with your colors and with not getting too much water on your substrate is to go ahead and use a heat tool. Once again, I like this Heat It tool by Ranger, and that'll dry that out so that that water from the Sike that I used will not be there when I lay the clear skies down. Also, I didn't like that first one, and so I just went and I blotted it up with a paper towel. It didn't get rid of all of the yellow, but it allowed it enough so I could start over again. I have all of my hats colored in, and I didn't even add any water to my brush when I put that blue down, just so it was nice and vibrant. From here, I can go ahead and cut this out. So you can put this on your scanning cutter, electronic cutter to do it, or since it is embossed, it does have that nice raised image. I find it to be super simple to cut out with my scissors, and I don't tend to get a sloppy cut because that embossed line, it kind of like is a guide. So I use it as a guide and I get a pretty good cut. I went ahead and cut those out, and as you can tell on this one, I accidentally cut off the little top, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because there are some really fun things that you can do with this. You can add a little pom-pom, you can use a little dot of your favorite Nuvo drops, you can use a gem. So even though that popped off, there are other things you can top that with that would be super cute. I wanted to leave that in there and tell you that in case that happens to you, because it happens quite often when you're doing these kind of detail cuts. So from here, we're going to move on to my fifth and final hack, and that is when you have such a busy background like this, and we're going to put the card together, and you want to put a sentiment. It can be quite hard to put a sentiment on this because it's so busy and it can get lost. And if you put the sentiment down on a strip of cardstock or white cardstock, you might cover up some of your pretty background, and you might not want to do that either. So it's a simple solution, and it's vellum. Take and stamp your sentiment using a good waterproof permanent stamp pad. I like Archival. It's acid-free, permanent waterproof. I love their Archival ink. I did it in jet black. Stamp that. You are going to want to let it set aside just a minute or two to let it really set up and dry because it is a slick surface. And then when you put it on your card front, it doesn't take away from the background at all, but you can definitely see where your sentiment is. Now, one of the other things when working with vellum, it can be quite tricky on how to adhere it and not have your glue or your tape runner show, like the marks show. That's why we have these cute little hats. So what you're going to do is you're going to actually try to put your adhesive, I like a glue adhesive for this, on your big lines on your font. Put that down, and then you're still going to have the edges that are going to be up. So from there, you're going to figure out where you want to place your little hats or your embellishments, and you're just going to do a dollop of glue right here to adhere, and then you're going just to use your stamped image or your embellishment to cover it up. So let's go ahead and just assemble this card. I went ahead and laid down my liquid adhesive. I do like to assemble my card flat, and the reason is because whenever you try to assemble your card already folded, it will cause there to be a spring, and that can cause your placement not to be correct. So I like to assemble the card flat, and I also like to use glue because of what I just did, where I might have to maneuver it around just a little bit. Then once I get it lined up to my placement is when I'm going to go ahead and just put on my vellum piece. And I did go ahead on the back, as you can tell, and did a couple dots of adhesive. And so I'm going to just place this. I like to do mine kind of towards the bottom of the card like so, and I did cut my vellum the length of my card front because I did want it to pop off over and just carry through like so. And then from here I'm going to decide where I want to put my little hats. And normally I like to work in threes, so I like there to be like, you know, three different embellishments, but these are so big that I think I'm gonna go with two. Once I decide where I'm going to place my hats, I'm just gonna go ahead and take this and put a little dollop of glue right there. And that's where I'm gonna put my first hat. And then I'm going to do another little dollop of glue on the bottom. And I did get some over on the vellum, which is not a big deal. Sometimes depending on your adhesive that you use or how much you use, you won't even be able to see it, but I can tell as this dries that green is really popping through, so I definitely want to cover it up. And to give this just a little bit extra personality, I'm going to use some pop dots on my card, on my little hats. So I'm just going to pop down. I am using the thin pop dots, not the thicker ones, because it doesn't add too much bulk to your card, so it can go nicely through the mail. So I'm just going to pop that down like so, and then do that on this side. And then from there, I added a couple of these gems because like I told you, I just don't like having an even number. I am an odd duck and I want my art to reflect that. So I went ahead and added these amethyst squares by Nuvo down at the bottom, just 3 of them. So now I have 5 different embellishments, and this card is totally done and ready to go in the mail to wish anyone a happy birthday. I hope you guys enjoyed this and you learned a few things, picked up a couple hack tips, and that you will scroll down if you're interested in anything I used. It is listed down there in the description box, as well as my YouTube channel and website. Again, I am Betz Golden, and thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, happy crafting.